to my YouTube. It's your girl Honey. It has been a long time. I know. I've been going through my Saturn return, so I've just been focusing a little bit more on myself and the things I've got to do. So I thought I'd just take a little bit of a break from YouTube just to kind of, organize things happening in my personal. So again, I really appreciate you guys reaching out and asking, what's the matter? Where are you? Yes, I'm fine. I'm here. Okay, I'm here. So today we actually have a new moon in Virgo. This video will probably be posted in a couple of days time, maybe, perhaps, but Virgo sits in my 5th house, so it was important to me to do something creative today, because the whole purpose of new moons is to start something new, pick up something old and kind of rebrand it or change it. But I thought this was the perfect day to jump back into YouTube. Alright, so we're going to talk a little bit about 8th house people, because most of you hear that I am always talking about the 12th house. I specialize in the 12th house. So I thought I'd make a video talking a little bit about 8th house people. I also have 2 groups on Facebook. One of them is called Escapism Astrology. That's for anyone who's into astrology. You guys are free to join the group. And the other one is for the Secret Mind of the 12th house people, which is for 12th house placements, Neptunians, Pisceans, you name it. Alright. But those groups I recommend joining should you wish to. Let's talk about the 8th house. So the 8th house is the original house associated with Scorpio, and Scorpio rules Pluto. So this video might be relatable to you if you have Pluto aspecting your personal planets. Personal planets are Sun, Moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus. And also if you have those planets in the 8th house, it's going to be very, this video will be very relatable to you. Now let's just think about the 8th house. The 8th house is the original house of sex, intimacy, death, rebirth, crisis, trauma, transformation, other people's resources, joint finances, inheritance, taboo subjects, banks, loans, taxes, power struggles. Like, this is a really intense house, and also occult sciences as well. So those of you who have planets in this house, and it's crazy to me because I'm always talking about the 12th house, because I specialize in that, because I'm a 12th house person. I'm also an 8th house person as well, but I never really talk about the 8th house. But shout out to that follower on my YouTube or my Instagram who suggested that I do an 8th house video talking about 8th house planets and what it means to have that. And also those people who have like a stellium in Scorpio, you guys might also relate to. So when you have planets positioned in the 8th house, there's usually something pretty karmic going on. And when I say karmic, I'm talking about there's a past life connection with this house. I find the water houses in general to be extremely karmic. 12th house is karmic in terms of fears and also not quite understanding, how to express those planets in that house. The 4th house is more so an ancestral link. So there tends to be someone who you may embody having a lot of similarities to, or gifts being passed on to you from a grandparent or a mother. Whereas the 8th house is more so in association with fears and power struggles. So when you have planets in there, what we're seeing is that you have experienced a power struggle from your previous life, or even from a very young age. When you're an 8th house person, you're dealing with major levels of intensity in your life. And in some cases, there can be a fear of showing your true self to that person, because you're consciously hiding that part of yourself through fear of how you're going to be received. But not through fear of, I don't know who I am, unless Neptune's here, but through fear of like being so vulnerable that this person's going to use that against me, and tell me that I'm weak, or I'm this and I'm that, and now I can't, now I've got to defend myself. And like, having planets in this house, there's just a fear of losing the power that you have in that planet. And that's what's frustrating about anything being here. Having lots of planets in here as well can make you someone who really loves money. But money in terms of, how can I get it not having to grind and graft all on my own? How can I get it through being around people, being around someone who has that money? Because again, this is the house of receiving, things from other people. This is other people's resources. So it's not necessarily someone who will grind and graft, but this person feels that they are good enough to be given stuff. So where is it at? We see a level of coarseness when you have an 8th house stellium or lots of planets in here, in terms of like being raw about how they want to make their money. And what I love about 8th house planets and stelliums is the beauty to want to explore psychology. And what we see is like 8th house people go through awful things, but I always say these things are here to build character and for us to kind of understand society as a whole. And by society, even those people who feel like they're not a part of society, an 8th house person is there to understand that. 8th house people experience manipulation. They can be the manipulator, and that's what makes them an amazing psychologist or psychotherapist even. And the beauty in that is that these people can develop this crazy psychic intuition in themselves and build a massive interest in occult sciences or knowledge in this area, because these people experience it for themselves, but also don't mind using their own body, their own sense of self, to help those other people to also transform and evolve through them. And this is how they see the beauty in something that to everyone else, oh, that's terrible, that's taboo, oh, that's devil's work, oh, they're like, bitch, no, this is my reality. I come from the ghetto, I come from the hood, but I see the beauty in it. I see why it's like this. I see why society or the government has made it like this. I see that. So these people can become very intuitive, very psychic, and feel very obliged to dive deeper into this house, this area, because these people live it and experience it. They ain't just watching from across the room. Like, these people live it all. 8th house stellium people, planets, whatever, there is always something about sex with them, because obviously this is the house of like sex in the sense of intimate sex in an intimate setting. And I look at the 8th house, Scorpio, Pluto, as a boundary, because again, this is a place where, do you show this person your whole vulnerable self? Do you? It all depends. That 8th house condition will show us how much that person's willing to show the public or the person. Sometimes 8th house stelliums, for example, I have seen, if we have like Leo in there, this person becomes extremely sexually expressive. Leo, Sun, a very strong Mars can be in there. Pluto can also be in there. Again, a strong Pluto can be in there. These people become very sexually expressive, okay? Sometimes Uranus as well. But when you have different planets in there, like an afflicted Mars or an afflicted Pluto, you got Saturn in there, you got Chiron in there, Juno retrograde. Like, there's so much different things you can have in this house that can and also got Neptune being in there, that can relate to you experiencing power struggles when it comes to your expression with sex, going through abuse, going through manipulation, choosing to keep yourself to yourself, you know, not want to show that person the real you. You know, I've seen Saturn be in this house where people are very sexually liberated and free, but they're choosing not to have intimate moments, but they're still having surface sex because Saturn's restricting the intimacy of that person. Do you get what I mean? So there's always something to do with sex in an 8th house, in someone's 8th house, if there are planets there, if there are 8th house stellium. And you know what's crazy, right? Even those people who don't really know or have any interest in psychology at all, these people are forever trying to evolve and transform, because they're constantly on a journey to be better people, because they see themselves as how everyone else sees them, that there's obviously some psychological issues, but they don't always want to face it. But they're always like, yeah, I'm trying to do better, I'm trying to be better, da da da. Unless you have the first house ruler in the 8th house, then their transformation is more so seen. But these people are constantly just trying to reinvent themselves and transform themselves and trying to be better people. But for some people, it can take longer than others. It's a constant journey with them. And I guarantee every time you see them, you can see them every 4 or 5 years or something. There is always a new way of them being or identifying with themselves. There's always something new going on. Oh, I've just found astrology. Oh, I'm a vegan now. Or there's always something going on, because these people are consistently trying to reinvent and change themselves for the better. But again, it's a journey. One of the common positions that I do see with 8th house planets, I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the sun being in that house. So think of the sun as your sense of identity, your expression, your inner child. And it's in a dark house such as the 8th house. You know, a lot of people do experience feeling powerless as children. And think of the sun as being your father, your domineering parent. It could be mum, but it tends to be father most of the time. Domineering parent who may have had some sort of control over you for whatever reason. And the example that I always give, because this is the most like clear example, and a lot of my clients would have heard me say this as well, but I have an ex-partner, right? 8th house sun, also got Pluto aspecting his sun, so he was hit bad, like rough. Anyway, he had a dad who happened to embody a lot of scorpionic energy, and he wasn't born in the UK. He came from a different country but came over here. This is my ex. Anyway, he came over here and he didn't have a passport, didn't have any kind of stay to be here, and he came here when he was about 6 years old. So when it turned, you know, he's 18, 19, 20, it's time for him to get his passport, his indefinite leave, his stay, whatever. But he fell out with his dad, and his dad didn't help him get his stay, so he was almost about to be deported. So this is hurtful, you know, for an 8th house sun person, because dad is supposed to be someone who you look up to, you know, and you can't look up to dad if dad is being this mean person, taking the power away from me. This is my ability to work, my ability to drive, my ability to have complete independence, and you can't have it because of the power struggle such as that going on. And usually when the sun sits in this house as well, we can see, you need to look and see what's happening with Saturn. Look at the aspects to the sun, look at the 10th house as well, because all of this contributes to the relationship that this person has with their dad, or the relationship that this person has with divine masculine energy, which can very much be in relation to men, but I'm talking about dominance in terms of projection. I don't just mean men, but in terms of projection, energy projecting. Does that make sense? So whether it be like a woman, it can be a woman who is projecting a lot of heavy energy. You know, that 8th house person can be very intimidated by that. And sometimes we see fears of this person kind of growing up, right? And now becoming this person who, well, you know what, I've experienced that power struggle, but I can't have that happen to me again. So now I've got to be in a place of power. And this is where a lot of 8th house suns get it completely messed up, like completely messed up. And they get it messed up because they feel, because they've experienced having no power, they have to embody power. And that's not always the case, because the 8th house is about psychology in a sense, so dismantling the ego. But 8th house suns get so caught up in this big ego that they have to be in control of their sense of identity. So if you tell them, look, you know, that wasn't funny because of XYZ, you shouldn't have laughed at that, or you shouldn't express yourself in that kind of way, because these people are used to being told how they should express themselves. To them, it's like,
don't you dare tell me what to do. Don't go there.
They get very defensive and they start being very reactive. Depending on what sign is positioned here, they can become very difficult to be around, because they make it very hard for their ego to be dismantled. So this is what I'm saying. In some cases, some people don't want to look at psychology or understand that their ego needs to be dismantled. They need to look at themselves, because their whole purpose in this life is to experience the ultimate transformation. So they need to look at themselves as, okay, am I a bit too much? Am I an intense person? You know, am I intense? If I am, why am I this way? Let me pick up a psychology book. Let me go and attend a therapy session. Let me become the therapist. Do you get what I mean? So that's what I like to see when the sun sits in here, because we see someone who is on a constant journey towards transformation and towards evolving, because not everyone is going to be that way. You've got to remember, the sun's purpose is to express the sense of self, right? And it's expressing itself in a way where I want to be in control of how intimate I want to be with each person. And when I say intimate, it's not just based on sex, but it's based on how seen you want to be when it's just you and that person sitting in the room. And you see, when you have particular signs in here, planets in here, certain signs can embody narcissism. I think every single sign has the ability to be narcissistic, but I find these planets or these particular signs in that house to embody some sort of narcissism. That's pretty easy to detect. 100% Gemini. Gemini in here can be very narcissistic, and obviously that would lead to sometimes being a Scorpio rising. We have Capricorn in here that can be very narcissistic, which can also be Gemini rising. Then we've got Capricorn rising, which places Leo in here, which can be very narcissistic as well. Those are the easiest narcissistic signs to detect. Doesn't mean that you are a narcissistic person, just pointing that out there. I want to just mention a little bit about Venus being in here as well. So people who have Venus in their 8th house, these people will never show you their partner. Yeah, these people are the types that will have all of these indirect quotes on Instagram and social media, but have a whole boyfriend living next door. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, they will have a whole partner or have a love interest, but ain't no one going to know, because they want to keep it completely private. Everything about Venus being here is very secretive. But I would say the 12th house is keeping secrets, but not intentionally thinking, oh yeah, it's a secret, just not telling people because you're not feeling to tell someone. Whereas when you have 8th house planets, you are consciously aware of the secret you are keeping. Do you get what I mean? So Venus is your self-esteem, value, your worth, how you make your money, how you earn your money, your relationship desires, your passive energy as well, your passive sexuality, and how you want to feel stable. Now think about this house as other people's resources. And it's crazy to me because most Venus in the 8th house people really want to date someone who's got lots of money, right? Lots of money, because they want a piece of the pie. And it's not like these people are gold diggers or can't make their own money. You've got to remember, Venus is in here, so they've experienced financial losses on their own. So it's like, most of these people tend to fear having or being broke and unstable. So these people are more likely to take risks when it comes to making money. And this is the house of intimacy, sex even. So a lot of Venus in the 8th house people can be very prone to doing sex work or working in some sort of like OnlyFans industry. I made a whole podcast about this, you know, working in the OnlyFans industry, working as a cool girl, like just doing things that people don't see or expect you to do. Your work tends to be very hidden, especially if you have Venus in conjunct the ascendant. So what you do is very much hidden and people don't expect that from you at all. So Venus is very attracted to people who are in a place of power. So power can be in terms of like They could be very well known in their community. They could have lots of different friends, have social economics behind them, be very established, have a lot of financial backing. Whatever it may be, if a Venus in the 8th house is messing with you, trust me, there's a reason behind it, because they desire financial security. Trust me, financial security. Now we also link this house to, well, think about Venus as a gift. Like, Venus is always there to give us something. Venus becomes very entitled in terms of receiving things from other people. So we see you getting gifts, we see you getting money, just being given things, especially by women or a partner. When Venus sits in here, right, it needs to understand that, again, it's going through a psychological breakdown when it's sat in here. So you guys need to start looking at, why are you attracted, you know, to dating someone who's in a place of power? Where did this come from? And sometimes as well, like 8th house suns, I've seen Venus in here as well. These people deal with some sort of like daddy issue, like there's an issue with dad and wanting to kind of be looked after in a sense. I find that a lot when sun is in the 7th house. I've seen it in the 8th house as well, having Venus in the 8th house as well, but feeling as though, okay, I have an issue, but I don't want to deal with the issue. I'd rather just mask it by having a particular lifestyle. Mars is your motivation, drive, temperament, reactions, response. Mars is seen as your energy, it's your conflict, confrontation. And when Mars sits in your 8th house, it's a really intense place to be, really, really intense. And the reason why is because a lot of people have anger problems here, because this is a very intense house, and Mars is in the house that it tends to have dealt with some sort of trauma. And to be fair, like when you have a Scorpio stellium, when you have an 8th house stellium, you're someone who has experienced a lot of trauma, you know, and most of the time it relates to sexual trauma as well. And especially when I see Mars in here, because Mars tends to relate a lot to the blood, you know, and having a very high sex drive. And I want to also mention, because obviously some people are like, well, I don't have a very high sex drive, I don't have this. You need to look to see what's happening with your aspects, because if you've got Saturn aspecting, you've got your Mars in Libra, or your Mars in Taurus or Pisces, those are very passive kind of signs. So when you have an afflicted Mars, you may not feel that you relate to the sexuality of Mars as much as like a Mars in Scorpio or a Mars in Capricorn or a Mars in Cancer, for example. Do you get what I mean? But when Mars sits in there, we see that there's been a sexual violation, and someone who is possibly dealing a lot with trying to control their anger. Their anger is just a work in progress, and they're trying to control it. Usually when this person gets mad, there is a deeper meaning as to why they are so angry. Like, you can get mad at someone for like crashing into your car by accident, but like these people are so angry to the point where they can smash things up and not care about the consequences. And these people deal heavily with consequences, and that's the whole point, because this is a house of, you know, that associates itself with karma. So these people deal a lot with consequences, and the reason why you guys need to work on, like, you know, sorting out your temper is because when Mars sits in here, I know a lot of you guys always, Mars in the 8th house people are always asking, am I gonna die young? Am I gonna die young? And I'm like, my ethics don't tell me that I have to tell you you're gonna die young, you're gonna die tomorrow, next week, next month. I don't do that. But when Mars sits in here, those same cycles that you're not going through the whole, again, psychological breakdown are gonna come back to bite you in the ass. And what I mean by that, because Mars is in association with the head, right? Because it's ruled by Aries, Aries rules the head. So we see that there can be a violent passing, or passing that involves a lot of blood, a passing that involves a dispute. Do you get what I mean? So the best thing when you have an 8th house stellium, when Mars is in here, you need to go through the cycle, you need to go through therapy to find out different ways you can manage your temper, how you can deal with your coping mechanisms better. Because the worst case scenario is when Mars sits in here, you're going to deal with something as horrific as that. Now, when you think about Mercury, Mercury is our communication, how you process information. It's our ability to generate ideas. And usually people who have Mercury in here growing up may have felt very powerless in their voice. You know, there could have been some sort of trauma surrounding communicating effectively, being understood by people. There could have been something where you may have felt shame, you know, surrounding speaking publicly. And one thing with Mercury in this house, yeah, is you people have to speak with conviction. And I mean this with like every little ounce of energy in me, because you guys have the power with words to manifest things. Even like when you guys are cussing the shit out of people and you say some mean shit, it will stick with that person. I'm not saying you guys should do that, I'm not condoning that, but I'm definitely saying when you're speaking, trust me, people, it penetrates people. It can be, you can say the most worst things to someone, they're going to remember that for years. I want to also mention about like siblings as well, because when it comes to siblings in this house, there can be a lot of like issues, and because it's like, remember it's the 8th house of karma in a sense, so these issues can also contribute to this being a karmic issue with your siblings. Any planets in the 8th house that tend to represent particular people in your life can revolve around things being very karmic. And also as well, like it can represent you feeling very powerless to those people. These people could have also passed away. There's always a link going on. So that is my video about the 8th house. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Again, my website is honeysastro.com. Should you wish to book a reading with me or my team, it's up to you. I have a podcast on there. Please subscribe to listen, and lots of other goodies on there as well. So I will see you guys next time. I'll try not to leave it so late, and take care. Bye.